Hello and welcome. My name is Jeff Hagan, and this is another video in my ongoing series of videos and other posts on how to use solar generators. It's late summer. Late summer means camping. So one of the most common questions that we hear on the forums is, how do I hook up my solar panels to my camping vehicle, and what panels should I pick when I go camping? We're going to cover that. We're also going to cover how you charge the solar generator from the vehicle. I'm out at a beautiful park. This park happens to be directly across the bay from San Francisco International Airport. So we're going to hear planes flying by because that's just kind of what happens around here. Behind me, we have my own personal camping vehicle. This is a Ram 2500 pickup truck that's got a Project M by 4-Wheel Campers box in the back. This isn't a video primarily going over the camper. We're going to cover primarily the solar generator itself and how we hook it up to the vehicle. At this particular point in my camper build, the outside of the vehicle is pretty much done-ish. The inside of the vehicle hasn't been hooked up at all. Let's go take a look and see what we've got. I've got the back open here. As you guys can see, there's really not all that much in there. Inside the back of this truck, I've got a couple of backpacks with stuff. I've got a floor, I've got 2 shelves. Pretty much, that's it. So wide open spaces for me to be able to put things together. On top of the truck, we have a couple of solar panels. Those are up on top of the roof, and you guys can see them here. And on the hood, we've got a couple more solar panels. That's what we have to start working with. As far as power, my plan is to power everything in the back of the truck off solar generators. We've got a Bluetti AC200 Max here and an EB3A to show 2 different kinds. So before we figure out how we're going to wire everything up and deal with all of that, how are we actually going to get power into these solar generators? Well, we're going to look at a couple different kinds of solar panels. We're going to look at solar panels that are outside the vehicle and solar panels that are mounted to the vehicle. We're going to talk about both, the pros and cons of each, and how to pick what you want. We already showed you I had a couple mounted to the vehicle itself, and that's definitely an option. The nice thing about that option is you don't have to set it up. When you get to your campsite, they're already good to go. They work while you're driving. That's a big one. You can charge your solar generator while you're going down the freeway from solar. That's assuming it's sunny while you're driving. But there's downsides to that too. They're kind of expensive. We'll go over that. They're harder to mount. There's work involved. And kind of the big one, if you park in the shade to keep your vehicle cool, you go camping someplace that's relatively warm, you don't want to run an air conditioner, you want to keep your vehicle cool, so you park in the shade. Well, now your solar panels that are on your roof are in the shade. So that's a downside there. What most folks start with is deployable, in other words, just solar panels that you bring with when you go camping. You set them on the ground, you run a wire between the solar panel and your vehicle. And that's a very good way to start. So we're going to start looking at those, and then we'll move on to the vehicle-mounted ones. Up here is a portable glass and aluminum frame solar panel. It's on a little stand mount that came with it when I got it. This is a slightly older version solar panel, so this one is 60 watts. The current models that are coming out, they're more of 100 watts, and they're a tiny bit bigger than these because they're not that much more efficient. It's a good start, good thing to start with. The advantages here is they're cheap. Pretty much that's where the advantages end, though. They're big, they're heavy, and they're glass, so they're fragile. Fragile things while camping don't tend to last very long. I've broken a number of these and basically given up on using them. The next type, and by far the most popular of the types of portable solar panels, is a film-based panel. So this has a film. Underneath the film is a piece of hard surface, typically plastic, that the film is adhered to. The film and plastic component is then placed into a canvas bag, which allows you to carry it around. This particular one is Bluetti's PV200. It's a 200-watt panel. Now, in order to tell if the panel is compatible with your particular solar generator, you need to take a look at the specs on the panel, specifically the open circuit voltage. Line up that open circuit voltage with the open circuit voltage rating on the solar input. If the volts don't line up, even if the watts line up, if the volts don't line up, it's not safe to use. Now, these panels, when they fold open fairly large. However, the reason people buy them and the reason they're so popular, when you're done using them, you can make them this small. Carry them around. They're pretty easy to carry around. Also, they're not fragile. So you're not going to have little bits of glass all over all of your camping gear when you're done with your trip. Always a plus. Now these, I have not yet managed to break one. They aren't good for weather. You don't want to put them out when it's raining or pouring or snowing because they're made of canvas. They're not going to hold up. They're also not designed for permanent mounts where you're going and putting it in your yard and just leaving it there for 6 or 8 or 10 months. For those, you want the glass panels, not the portables. But the portables for camping, these things are king. So how do you get the power from the solar panels into your solar generators? Very common question that comes up. What you do is you go to your local electronics retailer or just Amazon and order some very long, or as long as you need, MC4 extension cables. Common question that I get is, does Bluetti make these things? No, Bluetti does not make MC4 extension cables. You're going to need to go and get these somewhere else. Now, what do you look for? Well, first off, you want enough length. Here I have a big reel of them. This is two 50-foot lengths connected end to end. Why? Because when I'm parked under a tree, there might be some distance between me and where I can take and put my solar panels, because I need the solar panels to be out in the sun. So I need enough wire. Two, the next thing you're going to look for is you want to look for outdoor rated wire. This is first off 12 gauge wire, and second off fairly thick shields. And you can see these in the advertising when you buy them. People will complain about the thin ones that they don't work so well. Why 12 gauge or larger? So first off, AWG or wire gauge. The smaller the number, the thicker the cable. So a 10 gauge is thicker than a 12 gauge. A 16 gauge is smaller than a 12 gauge. So you want 12 gauge or thicker. So 12 gauge, 10 gauge, 8 gauge. Those are what you're looking for. Why 12 gauge? All cables lose power. There's no such thing as a cable that's not going to lose power. The amount of power that you lose depends on the voltage, the length of the cable, and the diameter of the cable. If you make the cable 12 gauge or larger, you're going to be losing less than 5% of your solar energy over a 100-foot run. Now, I only have a 50-foot run of cable right here, so I'm going to be losing less than about 4% of my power through the cable itself. Good thing. 16 gauge wire, you'd be losing more like 20%-ish of your power over the wire itself. Why do I have it on a nice reel here? Because I don't like detangling cables. Vehicle-mounted solar panels. Well, when you're mounting it to the vehicle, the shape of the panel becomes much more of a concern. So, first off, don't just go get whatever panel you can because it's cheap, because you're going to get it and then you're going to get it home and you're not going to be able to figure out how to mount it to the vehicle. You do have the same two choices. You have film-based panels and you have glass panels. On my truck here, I have a couple of film-based panels. These are made by a company called Cascadia 4x4. No, they don't pay me for this. In fact, nobody pays me to make these things. I do it because I do it. And these are just glued to the hood with 3M double-sided sticky tape. The nice thing about the film panels is they don't weigh very much, so the tape is going to hold them down. The not so nice thing about the film panels is the film panel has to fit the vehicle. These are custom made specifically to fit this kind of truck, which means they are expensive. Also, notice, I have 3 panels here. 1, 2, 3. These 2 panels are identical. This is a different panel from these 2, which means I have to have 2 different solar controllers in order to control these 3 panels, because you can't put non-identical panels on a solar controller and have them work nicely. So that's a thing. The way I have these hooked up, these 3 aren't even going to charge the solar generator at all. These 3 are going to charge the vehicle battery, and I'm not even going to try to get panels from these, power from these to the solar generator itself. Now, they do make, of course, after I bought these, of course, a single large panel that fits across the whole hood. That's actually pretty cool, because you can get about 200 watts on most camping type vehicles. Go to Cascadia 4x4, take a look at what they're selling. They've got them for most vehicles that are set up for camping, where you got a big panel across the hood, because you don't typically put a lot of other stuff on the hood. So it's a relatively easy option, if an expensive option. Next, I have a couple of panels on top of the truck itself. Now, these are also film-based panels, but you can see, or maybe as good as I can get anyway, you can see that they are on aluminum frames. Why would I take film-based panels and stick them on aluminum frames? The top of an RV, the roof, requires maintenance. If you take a panel and glue it to your roof, the next time you have to repaint or reseal the roof, you are going to destroy the solar panels. If you are going to put panels on the roof of an RV, make absolutely certain you can remove the panels from the roof so you can do roof maintenance. That's why I have them bolted down instead of just glued down. Now, what size panels do you need? I have no idea. How big is your roof? Unless you know the size of your vehicle, you're not going to be able to pick what panels are there. So picking mounted panels is harder than picking portable panels. You still have to do the open circuit voltage compatibility check. You have to make sure that your solar panels aren't going to overload your solar generator. But in addition to making sure your solar panels aren't going to overload your solar generator, you also have to figure out how you're going to mount them, and you have to actually get them mounted. They have to fit. The panels on my roof are running through the superstructure of the truck into a wiring harness, which is not really hooked up to anything yet, and into a DC circuit breaker, which will eventually be mounted to the sidewalls of the vehicle. I'll go over in just a minute why we need this DC circuit breaker. Now, don't just go to Home Depot and get an AC circuit breaker. A DC circuit breaker is a different beast. Even though this isn't particularly high wattage and high voltage, the circuit breaker needs to be larger for DC than it is for AC. So I got a specific DC circuit breaker. See, I've got 52 volts coming out, 53 volts. And this is going into my AC200 Max, which is happily charging away at 89 watts. Now I have 180 watt solar panels on the roof. I've got 2 of them. I'm putting out 52 volts. Why am I only charging at 89 watts? Well, it's about 6:30 in the afternoon. It's kind of hazy and there's some clouds. So that's about normal. You're really only going to get your max wattage out of a solar panel in the middle of the day, not at 6:30 p.m. And my clock is a little off here on my AC200. Looks like I have to fix that. But anyway, so now what happens if instead of charging the AC200, I want to charge its little brother, the EB3A? Well, the EB3A cannot handle 60 volts. In fact, even as I've got a cloud coming over, you can see I've got 52 volts coming out of my panels. That's not going to work. That's going to blow up the solar input. It's not worth it to try to plug too much solar into your solar generator as far as volts, unless you want to break the thing. So there is a workaround, though. Let me get a piece. What we have for the EB3A is we're going to make use of a DC to DC converter. So this one has an input rating of 36 to 48 volts, which, by the way, actually takes up to 60 because that's what the specs page says. And the output of this is 24 volts. So this is going to take the 60-something volts that I have coming out of my solar panel, and it's going to turn it into, here we go, we got coming out of the solar panel, 50 volts, 49 volts, 50 volts. It's really driving that solar panel pretty hard. Down here we've got the circuit breaker, which I need because I cannot plug this DC converter in while the power is on. If you're going to plug this and unplug this, you have to turn the power off, which means you have to have a power switch for your solar panel to make this trick work. But DC to DC converter, how much power do I have going into the EB3A? Remember, it was 80 watts earlier? 65. There is a loss when you use these devices. The specs say generally 95% efficient. I've measured them. No, they're not 95% efficient. They're more like 85 to 90% efficient, which is actually not bad at all. What it means is I can charge my EB3A off solar panels that are too high of a voltage range for the EB3A if I hook it up properly. And it does work, and you do have to buy the right parts. So you have to make sure, number one, you have a DC to DC converter. These, by the way, are not expensive. These little guys, you get them on Amazon, they're, I don't know, $35, $40. Now, notice there's no fan. No fan. So you have to get it much larger in wattage rating than you're actually going to use. This particular one is rated for 400-something watts, 480 watts, I believe it says there. The EB3A will only ever charge at 200 watts off solar. So this is a good size. This same converter, by the way, Bluetti has a number of solar generators. The EB3A, the EB55, which I don't have one of, by the way, the EB70S. They all have the same input range of 12 to 28 volts. This same converter will work for all 3 of those. So this will allow me to plug too much solar into my smaller solar generator, and that's how you do that. The last topic we're going to cover today is how do we charge this from the alternator. We get that pretty frequently. Well, the easy way, of course, it comes with a cigarette lighter adapter, which, of course, I don't have a cigarette lighter port back here. So you can run a cable from the alternator into the AC200. You can do that. It'll charge. It gets 12 volts. But it's going to take something like 10 hours to charge at 12 volts. And unless you're doing a multi-day trip where you're driving 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day and you've got the engine on the whole time, it's not going to be a smart plan. Also, you do not want to wire up your alternator cable to stay on when the engine is off. Reason for that, your typical car battery is designed for high amperage and low wattage situations. In other words, it's designed to start the car. It's a car battery, that's what it's for. It's not designed to put out a large amount of power over a long period of time. The actual capacity of a car battery is pretty small, about 200, 300 watt hours, maybe 400 for the really big ones. Basically, this guy's little brother, the EB3A, your typical Honda Civic battery is not any bigger than what's in the EB3A. If you charge an EB3A dead to full off a car battery, your car battery is not going to start your car. So don't wire it up in such a way that whatever lead you're charging from stays on when you're charging. But that limits you to 100 watts. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. You can do it. It's actually pretty easy to hook up. All you got to do is run the wire. Downsides to that, really there's two. One, if you have solar panels on the roof, you can't use both at the same time. You've only got one solar input on most of the generators. So the AC200 Max has dual charging. You can charge from AC and DC at the same time. The EB3A, same thing. Dual charging, AC and DC at the same time. Can't charge from two DC sources on the EB3A. AC200 Max, you can, with the DC charging enhancer, charge from two DC sources at the same time. But that means you've got to bring it with. So yeah, you can absolutely do it. It's a little bit more work. But still, it's going to charge really slow off the alternator. So upgrading, things I see on the forums, upgrading your alternators. You put a bigger alternator in the car. Is that going to make it charge faster? Answer, no. Why? The Blue Eddy has no idea that you've done it. It's not testing your alternator to see how big the alternator is. It's just pulling power. How much power is it pulling? Each solar generator has an MPPT solar controller in it. It will pull a certain amount of wattage at a certain set of voltage. The diagrams we're showing here are for the AC200 Max. It starts at about 12 volts, goes up to 145 volts, and it pulls more power as the voltage goes up. A car will give you 12 volts, just 12 volts. There's no way to tell your car engine to make 35 volts. Can't do it. Not from a car anyway. Now, the car electronics don't know how to do that. Now here's the EB3A and the EB70S. Again, I don't have numbers for the EB55, but it's probably very, very similar. That's going to start at about 12 volts and run up to a little bit over 28 volts. And you can see that hard cutoff at the end of that graph. It will not take more power than it wants. So if you want to get the wattage faster, you're going to have to boost the voltage. Or the other option, of course, is just to charge off AC, because they all come with an AC wall brick or some way to hook them up to AC. So let's say you want to get the voltage higher. How can you do that? Let's go back to my old friend, the DC to DC converter. This particular one takes in 12 volts. Outputs 48 volts at 30 amps. This is a 1400 watt device. It's about $300 for one of these things. And it has such high input current. This is the input side. The input side has to have a plastic shield on it because it's going to have so much current running through here that you don't want to zap yourself. The output side just has little terminals because when you do the conversion between amperage and wattage, volts is amps times watts. Well, you're going to have the same amount of wattage going out. Well, you're going to lose 10% roughly. But you're going to have the same-ish amount of wattage going out that you have coming in. So you're going to have lots more amperage going in than you have coming out, which means you need really, really, really thick cables when you go to hook this thing up. Same thing, do not hook this up directly to your car battery and have it running when the engine is off, because then you're going to have a dead car battery. So that's not going to work so well. Okay, DC to DC charger, that is one of the two options. The downside of this, of course, is output is 48 volts. Your EB3A is not going to charge off one of these because it cannot handle 48 volts input. You can, if you want to, use the double DC to DC converter trick where you plug another converter into this one and downgrade the voltage again. Then you're losing more power. The other problem with these is they're solid state. 100% solid state is good, but there's no fan. This is going to overheat. So two ways to mitigate that. One, always buy these at twice the rating that you need. An AC200 Max is going to charge at most at 900 watts. This is a 1400 watt device, so it's going to charge quite a bit faster. Okay? Excuse me. This can handle quite a bit more power than the AC200 Max will pull. The AC200 Max will not charge faster than its rating. Don't get me wrong there. But the amount of heat that's going through this thing depends on the charging weight. So if I make it bigger, larger than is needed, it's going to heat up slower and has less of a chance of overheating. But The main problem is there's no fan, and there isn't really a good way to add a fan to it. And it's going to be in the back of a car, so it's going to get pretty hot. So the other option, which by the way is even bigger for reference, this is an inverter, 1000 watt pure sine wave, so it has to be pure sine wave or it's not going to work. A Bluetti device is not going to run off a modified sine wave inverter. I will make another video on inverters to cover this later on. But short to say, don't buy it unless it says pure sine wave on it. You're just going to waste your money. It also has big, beefy input contacts because 1000 watts at AC is something like 100 amps. A little bit under 100 amps at 12 volts. 80-something amps if I'm doing my math right. And I've got a couple plugs in the front. The nice thing about these guys, they have a fan inside. The other thing about these guys is they are going to be more compatible across different solar generators. Let's say I want to dual charge the AC200 Max. I can dual charge the AC200 Max off of solar, and this with the DC charging enhancer going into the going to the AC charging port, or this just going through the AC power brick that came with it. I can do either one. That works. EB3A, it does do dual charging, but the power brick is inside the unit itself, which makes it more portable. It's kind of a nice thing that it's in there. However, what that means is I cannot dual charge from both a DC to DC charging enhancer and solar panels at the same time. I can do one or the other. I cannot do both. However, I can dual charge from solar panels and an inverter at the same time. Also true for the EB55. You cannot dual charge from two DC sources simultaneously unless one of your two DC sources happens to be exactly the same output as the AC adapter, which good luck finding a DC to DC adapter that does that. So which camp am I in? In case you haven't guessed, I'm in the inverter camp. I picked up one of these. These is almost certainly going to be installed in the back of my truck in the next couple of days. It's actually the next project and wired up to the alternator. Now, on the terms of alternators, putting a bigger alternator will not make the solar generator charge on its own faster. However, in some vehicles, a larger alternator is going to be required. If you have a too small of an alternator and you're drawing too much power from it, there will not be enough power left to actually run the car, and your car will stop. I've been in vehicles where that's happened. It's actually very embarrassing for the owner because they're sitting there and then suddenly their car dies and they realize that the reason they're doing that is because they have too much electronics running in the back of the truck. So how is it that you fix that? Well, check with the manufacturer of your vehicle to see how much power it actually needs. Cars don't usually say in the manual how much power the car is using internally to the car itself. It says, oh, we have a 600 amp alternator. Great. That tells me nothing because I have no idea how much the actual vehicle uses. So check with the manufacturer to see what the vehicle uses. That'll tell you how much is left. This particular truck, we got it with the dual alternator option from the factory, so there is plenty of space because the truck will actually run off a single alternator, so that the second one is sitting there doing absolutely nothing. So I have enough power. So that's another thing to check if you're going to charge at higher wattage. So it is a bit of a project. If you want to charge at 100 watts, easy. Have a cigarette lighter port, or just run a cable to your battery and have the cable run through a relay so it only turns on the power to the cable when the engine's running. Easy, easy, easy. Not hard. If you want to charge faster and not have it take 10 hours to charge, there is a bit of a project in order to charge it from an alternator. But my suggestion is the inverter route. Also, if you're in an RV or something, you may already have an inverter in the RV that's running off the engine. So in that case, you can just plug it in as long as it's pure sine wave. Last little bit, one other thing that tends to come up, people ask about whether or not they can recharge these off the generator in your RV. So you've got an RV, it's already got a generator in it, you want to charge the solar generator from that. Sometimes, it depends on the generator. Remember how I said you need pure sine wave? Well, you need pure sine wave generator from your alternator, from the generator in your RV as well. And a lot of them, specifically the older ones made by a company called Onan, which was very popular in about 5-6 years ago, those put out horrible power. I'm going to put out a video a little bit later on what exactly the term horrible power means. But if the total harmonic distortion, which I, again, will define later, the total harmonic distortion of your generator is higher than about 5%. The Bluetti AC200 Max and all of the other Bluetti lineups will simply reject the power and refuse to charge. And there have been folks that have that issue, and there's really not much you can do about it. There's nothing that you can add to a generator to clean up the power, not in any appreciable way. There are snake oil salesmen on the internet. They will sell you a power cleaning device for $800 or something, which has 3 capacitors and a relay in it, and it does nothing basically. There are surge suppressors for RVs. Those are very important, by the way, for lightning protection, but they do absolutely nothing to clean up your power. So be very, very careful not to get scammed on those devices. The real only solution to this is to buy a different generator that has an inverter system built in, which gives you a pure sine wave output. All right, well, that's how to get your solar generator working off of your vehicle. If you've got questions, stick them in the comments. If you have an idea for the next video for me to make, stick them in the comments. And have fun out there. Enjoy your camping.